Hello and welcome to the aForm Show, the premier podcast for all things architecture and design across the MENA region. Welcome to your tribe. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. Our guest today is Vaishali Deshmukh. She is a design director based in Dubai. Vaishali has designed and delivered projects within the region for close to 2 decades. Needless to say, she is known for exciting innovations in design and has a wealth of experience to share. So without further ado, let's get into it. Good morning, Vaishali. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Alan. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So, number one, we were talking off air, and I feel there is so much that we can talk about because I think you've had one of the most diverse backgrounds to architecture, which is pretty cool. That's not a very common thing. So I think that's a good starting point for our listeners, people who perhaps do not know you and are not aware of the work you do.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, how did you find architecture/interior design? Did it find you? Did you find it? What's the story?
So I think most architects, and for all the architects that I've spoken to, there is somewhere art relation, something to do with colors, this, that, whatever. I, funny enough, didn't know any architect in my whole family. There were no architects. I didn't even know the profession that existed.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So my dad works in an oil company, had an oil plant drawing, and out of that, I sketched out a residence plan.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then I realized that, okay, this is a profession. It's not just a hobby. And mom had to find out, okay, what is the process and everything. So civil engineering came up. And I was like, okay, that's it.
Oh, that's close, but so far.
Yeah.
You're in the right neighborhood, but not in the right address.
Yes. And we knew of interior designers, but then that was like, it was not enough. And then we figured out, okay, architecture. By then I was in grade 9. And so that realization that architecture existed or architects existed was only a very far off conversation. It was never on the table. We didn't know anybody. So I'm like the first architect in my family.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, very similar story with me too.
Yeah.
I don't come from a family of architects. My wife would say different, but I don't. And I had a similar thing wherein I knew I wanted to do something in art. I was that student that was like, mathematics just passed, sciences just passed. And then art was like effortlessly like A star, 90, 95, without even trying.
Yeah.
And then I had this whole like, have you seen this movie called The Namesake?
Mm-hmm.
So exactly that happened with me, which is we did this family trip to see the Taj. And fortunately for us, we got a really good guide to kind of take us through the entire thing. I mean, this dude was doing like a double PhD in Mughal architecture. So he knew his stuff. And it was actually there that I came to realize, I'm like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. Like you can actually influence form and space to create feeling. Yeah. And I've never really experienced that before. This whole sort of, if you've been there, the sort of compression and release and, void and dark shadow into bright opening and all of these very subtle things, which I think the Muggles, I call them, which the Muggles probably don't get. But to me, it was like this, wow, you can actually design it. And wow, who designs it? And I sort of had this moment with my parents, and I'm like, I think I want to do this. I think I'd be good at it. And because I was always that kid that turned off lights and turned on lights and, was like, oh, it's too bright here. that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, lights is such an important thing, right? I was official child in the family who would be maintaining the aesthetics of the house.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out. We know our kind. We know who we are.
So whether it was the flower arrangement, whether it was the furniture. Okay. And I have this habit even till date. My kids get annoyed with it, where if it's a good day, every 2 weeks, we change the arrangement and the furniture in the house, or at least every 3 months. For sure.
Yes. This annoys my parents a lot. I don't even live with them anymore, but it annoys them because they're like, I just got used to this. Like, why? I'm like, you don't understand. And they also don't understand why I change my sofas every 6 months to a year. Because they're like, what was wrong with it? I'm like, I'm done with it. That's what's wrong with it.
That's what's wrong.
So, I completely get that. But wow, okay. So a very organic approach, I would think. Yeah. Not so much influenced by how you grew up or people around you or things like that. No. Okay, interesting. So now that you've found the field, you've obviously gone through education, you've gone through practice, you've sort of had a pretty substantial career growth over a pretty long time as well. So I would kind of want your opinion on a couple of items. The first one being that a lot of our audience are sort of mid-level to senior designers. That's kind of the bulk of the people that listen. So if you could speak to them and tell them, hey man, listen, it took me X amount of years to learn this one thing, which really, really helped me throughout my career.
Yeah.
What would that be? Do you have such a thing that you could share with them?
I probably can't pinpoint a particular thing, but what I did realize, yes, of course, we do architecture because we believe that we are great designers. But within that spectrum, I've also seen some great project architects or somebody who is very good with quantity surveying and things like that. So it's very niche field, architecture, but also a very vast field. So I have seen some great graphic designers coming from architecture. One of my friends who lives in Nepal now, in fact, has done 5 years of architecture and then went into museum curation. And so that's her calling. So it's got history, it's got your physics to it. How do you want to apply it? And if you are smart enough, it also has a little bit of business acumen to it.
True. Yeah. I think, again, when we were talking off air, we were talking about, well, you mentioned it, but I sort of didn't add on that you mentioned that you do listen to a lot of the business side of architecture as well, or the business side of most businesses, I suppose, which has kind of been my pet peeve off late also. I've really gotten into, well, internationally, I suppose Diary of a CEO is a big one, but even the barbershop with Shantanu is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's quite cool to hear like how consulting guys think about businesses, because I suppose as a creative, we have an advantage wherein we can problem solve creatively. But if you kind of don't know the foundation of what the solution should be, you're kind of just shooting in the dark constantly. So I think it's fun to hear those. Have you had any sort of aha moments when you've listened to any of these guys?
I like the founders as well.
Oh, okay.
I think I was listening to one with, I'll have to look into the name and tell you this later. But so international interior designer, and she was mentioning how she came into interior design at the age of 16. And then there was another one who said that I came into interior design at the age of 40. And both bring their own, kind of experience and everything. So it was interesting when we talk about business generally, right? Especially creative business, that you think that you want a certain years of experience to then set up your studio. And then there are some people who have set it up right when they started off. You develop that experience. And I think that's one of the aha moment I take away, is where you develop that experience, no matter whether you have your business or like setting up your own studio, or you are a creative director in one of the organizations. So, yeah.
So is it, because I do get asked this question a lot from students as well, saying that, should I just directly from university set up a practice? Because I suppose theoretically, legally, I could, but I have no portfolio of built work. I have no design work, but maybe I can use this time to learn all this whilst running a business. I am on the fence. Again, it depends which day you ask me, to be honest.
Correct.
There are some days where I'm like, yeah, totally, go for it.
Yeah.
And then there are some days I'm like, hey man, maybe, work in a studio for a year or two, see how backend works, see how billing works, and maybe then do it.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I don't really know if there's a right way to do it or not.
Again, like you mentioned when we were off air, show me your portfolio.
Yeah.
I think that's where I would start from. Like, even if it has been your academic portfolio, what are your strong points? Do you see any one thing that you know that you have the strength to develop this then further? It not necessarily be design. You could be great at people's person, and that's also requires some kind of a skill to just listen to people.
True.
That kind of a virtue cannot be developed.
Yeah.
You need to have a little inclination towards that. Then you can actually have the narrative for the space.
Yeah, that's true. This is something which I see in portfolios, and I do want to touch upon this topic because it is quite timely in the sense that there are a lot of students that are probably now starting off final year and are looking to put together portfolios for the coming summer. A narrative, yes, 100% is important. When you think about portfolios and you think about the portfolios that you've seen from fresh grads, for example,
Yes.
what are the sort of things that stood out to you, both positively and negatively?
Honestly, I don't come across too many of them, but what I have seen positively, yes, the skills, like what we would call not necessarily design skills, Could be presentation skills. Could be like how you want, what do you want to focus on? Somebody could be focusing just on details and somebody's focusing on their software skills. How do you present that? Speaks a lot. For me, it's important. How do you do that? That speaks to me volumes about what can you bring on the table. That's just design wise. Secondly, it's also about how do you present yourself. So that small narrative about what are you speaking about yourself gives me a little bit picture of what your experience could have been. Could you have traveled enough? Could you have actually have the empathy towards, design? And those are little things that I think should stand out in a portfolio when you are, it's not design only that you are looking at.
Okay. That's a good sort of differentiation factor, I suppose. If you do want to, I suppose if a graduating batch has all done the same project, admittedly different designs, but the brief, I suppose, being the same, they'd all have very similar sort of scale of work, type of work, etc. So adding that additional layer helps to differentiate a portfolio, I would think.
Yeah, and also I think like back then we would say school of thought, where what university you're coming from also has a certain build form of the portfolio or a certain template of the portfolio. And I have seen this like XYZ universities, there's a standard format. Most of the students would have just followed that format, whereas the other ABC would be open to formats and the students have been a little more creative or have pushed the boundaries kind of a thing. So I would not look at the portfolio only in that spectrum. Like knowing now and being aware about it helps, but it's important about how, and generally in life, how you present yourself, how you walk into a room, all of that changes and matters.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of soft skills, which I feel bad to constantly having to, point out to academia. I'm like, yeah, here's one more thing you guys need to work on. Soft skills for architects. But yeah, I think it's just such a diverse field, right? Like there's so many things that you need to be looking at.
Yeah.
Which is maybe why there's this topic of conversation that I have with our current director, wherein he made the point that architects, well, even interior designers to an extent, but mainly architects, sort of hit their stride, meaning this is when they're at like peak performance, they're, best level of design, most informed design, etc. Typically happens when they're in their 50s.
Okay.
Because it just takes so long to work on projects, deliver projects, see projects in operation for 3-4 years and see how you could have done things better, and do that across multiple typologies and multiple countries and multiple clients to then sort of come together and be like, okay, now it kind of, this is what works.
Yeah.
And by that time, you're normally in your 50s.
Yeah.
So I was like, but that's so long, man. That's so long. What if I want to do it right now?
Yeah. But I always compare, and I don't know why we get left out with other professions, right?
Yes.
So you would not, or typically you would be a little detrimental about going to a surgeon who is just passed out.
That is true.
Versus somebody who's had enough amount of operations done or enough amount of situations seen.
Yeah.
Because the conditions keep changing.
Yeah.
And that's also true to architects.
That's true. Yeah, I suppose in that particular metaphor, you want the experience of having done that process again and again and having seen all the sort of unforeseen errors that could happen. But on the flip side, when it comes to a creative, maybe you want the fresh grad that is not 100%. Influenced by traditional norm and is willing to, take a risk and try something, which maybe an experienced architect wouldn't do because of laziness or just general sort of, this is how we do it and this works. So yeah, I think that is an advantage that architects have, that they could do that.
Yeah.
That's possible. Yeah. Interesting.
I think a studio should have a mix. It's very important also, like somebody who is completely studio driven and also a little bit of the design and build section, because, and this is again with the region generally, it so happens that when we're doing design, we're so focused on the design aspect of things and everything, you might not get as many site visits as you would want. And you get left out on a lot of learning when you don't have that. Or somebody who's coming from a design and build background has seen enough because the factory is continuously running. You can walk in, walk out kind of a thing. You know what the details that are going wrong on site and things like that. You need that kind of an eye in a studio as well. So you need a proper mix of people. And of course, the new blood is always required. It's relevant. to what is the norm.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of advertising agencies now which I've spoken to that have sort of a mandate wherein the median age of the office needs to be 30 or 32. So kind of getting in people literally when they're like early 20s and sort of capping off your senior team at 45 or so. And that again by design is so that you constantly have this feedback loop of experience and complete naivete that comes together, but both bring their own sort of expertise, and together that sort of ensures that things are always fresh, things are always timely, current, etc. Is it a bit ageist? Probably, I would think so, but yeah, it is a way that they do it and it works. So I'm not sure if we have anything that we can take from that. But
yeah, I mean, I think most of the studios these least have a good amount of junior architects, junior designers, and then you have a senior designer, a project lead, and then you have the directors probably. Yeah, but that's just an organogram that has been developed, and it's a learning curve. It is a learning curve because sometimes you end up with all just the drafting work or things like that. You have expectation from the junior designer to do it. But probably that's not the role you want the junior designer to take up. You want the junior designer to do your concept design. Then do this, because there are chances of errors happening with detailed designing more from the junior than from the senior. Yeah.
Or a spec document or anything like that. Yeah. True. That is true. On the flip side though, I feel like, I don't know, I'm of the opinion that as a young designer, you should at least try to do as many things as possible, which is why I tell a lot of young designers to generally, unless you know exactly who you're working for, tend to stay away from large studios. Try to work with smaller boutique studios, mainly because just by definition, you will be asked to do everything from doing an InDesign report to a bid, to a concept, to a site visit, to a client meeting. Like you'd get access to all of that, wherein you probably wouldn't the larger the firm you go to. And I feel like if you do that for a long enough time, well, long enough meaning a few years, you'll eventually find out what you're good at, and then you can sort of like double down on that.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can say this in practicality because I've experienced this myself. So when I started here in Dubai, I was a landscape architect. I joined a landscape firm and not an architectural firm.
Cool.
So that gave me such a different prospect of what do landscape architects design and how do they design. And this was again for like master plans and things like that. Moved to doing architecture purely with a 2-people team.
Oh, okay.
And that was precisely, we were doing the design and then also doing conversations with the structural engineer, with the MEP engineer, also going to DM to get approvals done. So that kind of exposure doesn't happen in large organizations. Today you have AORs and things like that. And it's just so much. It's great because it's streamlined now. But do I know everything? Probably not. And I think that kind of structured where and what I'm doing now is from there, then moving to interior design and knowing what do I want to do was continuously experiment, going more into it.
I do have, now that we've kind of ended up here, there was a question which I wanted to ask, which our production team says I should not.
Okay.
But to be honest, when we
Should
wanted,
I be nervous?
Maybe a little bit. Okay. No, when we wanted to get you, I actually did want to ask this question, and I don't mean it in a very sort of, there's no right answer. But I find it interesting to ask profiles like yourself, which have sort of done architecture and now done interior design and significantly have had exposure to both. I think many designers don't get that. You tend to you're mainly an architect who does some interiors, or you're an interior designer that has done a bit of architecture. But I think you've done a significant amount of both. So I suppose the petty way to ask is, which is better?
Okay, this is a safe one.
That's all I wanted to ask.
Neither. Yeah.
Interesting answer.
Yeah, I really feel neither because I think both have their strengths.
Okay.
And I was answering this to somebody else the other day, that collaboration is so pivotal, specifically whether it is hospitality or residential design. Wouldn't say so much in commercial design, but residential and hospitality, that collaboration is so pivotal because...
When you say collaboration, you mean between...
architects and interior designers.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I've had conversation with interior designers, purely interior designers, where structure might not be the concern. Like, just because they don't know about it, they've never even questioned it.
Yeah.
So
they're like, yeah, we'll just move this load-bearing column. Big deal.
No, and also walls. Like in now that you have all your PTC slabs and, the precast walls and things like that, you can't break through those walls.
Nor can you cut an opening for a duct. Just saying. I recently found that out. You can't.
But do those questions even come on the table? Probably not.
Probably not.
Hence, I think it's very important to see both in a very broader.
True. I sort of had the inverse of that. I think many years back, I think when I did my first salon, which was eye-opening for me because I sort of went as, all right, listen, I'm the architect. Who really cares about cushions, right?
Yeah.
And after that trip, I was sort of humbled, like seriously humbled. I'm like, there is so much that goes on with like just a sofa. Forget about any other kind of furniture. Like, I mean, just the filling and the stitching and the piping and the type of foam and, having it. I mean, and that's a fixed piece. You can get further complicated with having, movements and modular pieces. And I was like, my God, this is like complicated. This is like a piece of engineering that's going on.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
And I would have never had that exposure had I not gone through something like that. I think I would have always been that sort of, I'm an architect and, okay, that's not my job. But I think, like you're saying, if there is this exposure to both sides, there's a newfound respect, number one. But number two, opportunity to push design boundaries a bit more, I think. Is that something you agree with?
I agree. And very correctly that you mentioned about these details, you will see a space and that this is designed by an architect or by an interior designer.
I'm going to paint you a picture, right? Concrete, brutalist box with big giant window and Eames lounge chair. Probably an architect, right?
100%. Layers on the sofa and beaded cushions and flooring details.
Ooh, herringbone. Yeah, 100% interior designer. Yeah, jokes aside, it is, I think there is a place for both, surely. But I think that truly, like if I can think about one of my favorite projects, Barcelona Pavilion, Mies van der Rohe, right? Architect who did a pavilion, not a residential house, a pavilion, but also did the interiors down to furniture, the infamous Barcelona chair and so on and so forth. That to me was one of the most experiential spaces I've ever been in. And he was an architect that did that.
Yeah.
On the same hand, I have been to a house where a very close friend who's an interior designer designed the architecture of that house. And I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was better than 90% of the things that I've seen here. So I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, do you think it comes down to the individual and their passion and curiosity and not so much the title and the field that would sort of define their work?
Well, I have to agree and we've seen this with many architects specifically. Taravando is not an architect at all.
Yeah, true.
Right?
True.
But he looks at spaces from lights. He doesn't look at spaces from the functionality or any of those things. For him, that light exposure in any space is so important. Does it come from education? Does it come from those kind of backgrounds? I don't think so. It's again very individualistic. There are architects who go, like you just mentioned, Mies van der Rohe, who go to the tiniest detail. Zaha Hadid, when she designs her spaces, she prefers to design the interiors as well. And we've seen at Bia, whether it was Opus, any of those ones, right? But does Norman Foster want to do that? Probably not.
True. Yeah, I think it does. It then probably does come down to the individual. That's true. Interesting. I'm actually now starting to think, what would I want to do an interior job? I think I would.
You?
I have. Okay. One of the proudest ones, Brabus. City Walk.
Yeah.
Like,
ooh,
people
nice.
who know me and people who have probably seen my arm, it's actually tattooed right there. Yeah, it's, I keep saying, right? Like, I've done massive towers, I've done communities, I've done master plans and delivered it also. Right? This 2,000 square foot retail space really challenged me. really challenged me on so many levels, but one of the most fulfilling projects I did, I must say.
Yeah.
A highly demanding client, rightly so, really wanting to focus on that, design of a space, not just have like a showroom and, throw two cars in and that's that, but really having this experience in that space, which is quite challenging in just 2,000 square feet to do anything grand. But I think the final outcome, if you ever visit, is actually really, really cool.
Now I will. Yeah.
But yeah, I think after that project, my entire sort of outlook to it changed. I think I would want to do an interior job now.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think I'd want to do a commercial job. Something which is kind of very deadline driven and kind of like commercially driven, maybe not so much. But a new concept for an F&B outlet, yes. Some kind of brief that hasn't been done before, yes. There was briefly a time where we were talking to a client that wanted to do a completely white box and just have like VR headsets and have multiple concepts in the same box, in the sense that you'd have like a clothing store, you'd have a shoe store, you'd experience them through VR, which at the moment might be those meta glasses or whatever. So the space would be the same, but you'd see different products. And then as you pick them, it would then be bought out so you could see it like physically in person. But the idea was to have multiple stores within a store, so to speak. So yeah, stuff like that I find very interesting. But yeah, if you tell me, this is an office space for a multinational headquarter and here is their 2,000 page brand guideline, probably not. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I definitely think. And that's what happens with experience, that when you pass out from universities, you probably don't know what is your strength. And rightly, also through experience, you know that I can cater to this much faster. Like I was speaking to one of the hospitality designer and she mentioned that, back then I would take probably 1 month to design a space, even if it's a room. And today she's like, I'd give concepts out in 3 days, like for the whole hotel. She's like, yeah, because now I look at it from the commercial point of view. I look at it from the stakeholder point of view. That's experience. But if I shift her and put her into a residential project, probably she's again going to take 1 month.
Yeah. I kind of agree with that, because I think what happens is things start to become intuitive. And clients ask me this all the time because they're like, if you can't do it that quickly, why are we paying you so much? And I tell them it's because I've done so much of it. I just know that a bed would fit in this room with this dimension. I don't even have to think twice about it. I know that it will fit. And I know that if you constrain it further, you'll have a problem. If you expand it further, you'll have a problem. And these nuances have sort of been scarred in my mind.
Yeah.
So that's how I just know. But yes, concurrently, if you ask me to now look at like a terminal lounge in an airport, probably not. Like you mentioned, I'd then go back to like basics and be like, so what's the kind of footfall a terminal lounge has? Like right down to base, because I would have no idea.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like door openings, something simple.
Yeah, door openings. But this is a good point for like all the young listeners listening in, right? Because I get this sense of frustration that they have, right? They're like, when's the end, man? Like when am I just going to like know it? Because you say that, it's learning and okay, I'm willing to do that for a year, for 2 years, 5, 10. But at some point I should reach like, the end of it where I'm like, I now know it. And I tell them, I'm like, there's no end. I'm sorry, but there's no end. Just when you think you know it.
Yeah.
Like with us, for example, AI has now sort of come in and become this whole new thing, which probably a fresh grad knows more about than even we do at this point. But we're also, just like they are, going to slowly but surely learn and see how it can work or not work, whatever it may be. But that sort of ditching the learner mentality, I think, is the big issue, which I think fresh grads need to, especially in design, need to accept. If you want to be successful, you need to have that learning 100%. Mentality. You can't just like be, okay, I'm done now.
No. Yeah, no. In fact, that's a very tricky attitude where most of them come around like, yeah, but I know. Yes, I know you know. But can you just like look at it from my perspective or from somebody else's perspective? Just see it differently. Because otherwise you're just giving the same thing.
True.
What are you giving different then? Where are we pushing those boundaries and things like that? Yeah, but learning is so much important. Traveling is important. And I think one of the, if you would say, if there are listeners of especially the mid, junior, senior level designers, I would say travel. Wherever, just watch, just see differently. You see concepts absolutely different.
I, to be honest, I would say I was one of those anti-travelers for a long time. And recently that has changed. Recently meaning in the last 5 to 6 years that has changed. And I actually had to identify why it was a problem. And I came to realize it wasn't the travel that was the problem. It was, in my mind, the thought of like packing and booking tickets and all of that was such a pain that I just like, it's not worth it. But once I'm there, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. This is awesome. So should anyone have that problem, I say overcome it.
Or delegate.
or delegate. But yeah, no, travel's a big one. Travel's a big one. Yeah, there's a lot that you see. There's a lot that you can learn for sure. And just generally how like different cultures and different people experience spaces, I think, is
And I
different.
think also developing a hobby is important. Personally, if you ask me, so I've very recently, in fact, 2 years ago, come across a drama club.
Ooh.
And I do drama as a
Ooh.
second thought process. Like I've met such interesting people. Kid you not. Yeah.
Oh. So is this so this is like you're sort of preparing for an eventual play that you're practicing for? Is it more like improv or
It's not improv.
Okay.
So it's a very interesting concept. So it's called the living room theater.
okay.
And it's basically amateurs or people like in your daily life, you just being architect Alan.
Yeah.
Right? Can you be any other person? Can there be another perspective to this?
F1 racer rally.
Yeah, like Avatar.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
okay.
yeah, so I think, but then what did that bring me to? Like stage direction. And now I realize, oh, I'm good at production. So but do I want to dabble into production in the theater and things like that? So yeah. So the living room theater is precisely for people who are interested in theater.
Okay.
Just to break from not being an architect and or any other. You could be a lawyer, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and perform. So we've done a couple of shows where we've performed in the studio. In fact, in my previous workspace, we performed in the studio where there are a bunch of like 50 people who've come and viewed it. There is no stage. It's experiential.
Okay.
But does that mean I'm going to also look into designing spaces which can give that? When you said commercial spaces, we have town halls now in most studios. Did we ever think that we needed a space for a town hall?
Yeah, probably not. That is true. Town hall is definitely not on a brief for a studio, but yeah, I can see it. Interesting. I do have a question I want to ask you now.
Yes.
Based on this drama activity that you've shared. I guess the question that I want to ask is, I agree that as architects, as designers, you should have another alternative passion/hobby, because I feel like there are times where this field will become quite frustrating, borderline depressing, and you need to have another sort of outlet to expression in some way, shape, or form, whatever it may be.
God bless you if you married an architect.
Yeah, that's a lot of reading for the both of you. No, but I suppose the question I want to ask is, do you think design in general, architecture or interior design, do you think it's a lifestyle career? And when I say lifestyle career, it is that alternative careers, I tend to, bring up accountants constantly, but they're just is, I suppose, their life can be completely isolated and divorced from their job, and it makes no difference.
Correct.
I feel if you take that same approach with a creative, it significantly reduces their creativity/output. If there is this clean break from what your life is and what your career is. Therefore, I've come to the conclusion that design needs to sort of integrate with your lifestyle, and therefore it's a lifestyle career and it's not really just a job. So my question to you is, do you agree with this, disagree with this?
I agree with it. You were consumed, I would say, by...
Like Venom in Spider-Man.
Yeah, it does. Each conversation, and you will see it like when you're doing conversations with your family and everything, and like people just generally who are not architects, you find it so difficult for them to see what your perspective is about any space or things like that, right? And you're constantly looking out. Oh, that's interesting. Whether you're traveling or, whatever, you're sitting at a bar, having a great time with your friends. And you're like, yeah, but there's something around this bar table which is not correct. Your hand suddenly goes under the bar table and want to check the detail out there.
Like, I see a drip joint.
So it does consume you. I see it positively. But then I've also seen certain people who completely take a break and like work is work primarily and then shift out. Doing the drama was precisely where I was like, okay, I'm constantly with only architects and designers and my whole conversation is just that. Like I'm not able to build any other personality within myself. Which is not a designer. I
remember having one of our very early podcasts. Shout out to Rahul Sudhir, if you're listening. He made this observation where he was like, as architects, we tend to think that, we're designers, we should be exposed, we should be cultured, we should be this and this and this. But if you think about it, most architects hang out with other architects and talk about architecture. And very rarely have friends outside of the industry,
True.
very rarely socialize outside of the industry. And yet somehow we're the ones supposed to be the exposed ones to multiple things and understand how humans interact. And his thing was that you need to have a diverse cross section of society.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like, I mean, building upon what he's saying, I understand where he's coming from, is that the more diverse people you meet, the more better a designer you'd probably become. But yeah, to go back to your story, my family's almost given up on me, because if they go to a new place, like my parents they have a word for it. They call it, he's Allening. And Allening is simply like, I'm walking around, like stroking walls, like looking up at ceiling details. I'll definitely visit the washroom, but do nothing in the washroom. Just kind of stare at like wash basins and mixers and being like, where's the trap over here? Where's the floor trap there? Oh, cool detail. It's hidden. I see it. Okay, cool. And I'm having this like internal dialogue in my mind, and I've not realized it's been like half an hour.
Yeah, my family hates to go to malls with me. They're like, and I have this specific rule with my kids when I walk into the mall, they're like, no furniture shops.
Yeah, that's that. If you take me to a furniture shop, you have yourself to blame. You have yourself to blame. If you take us to a furniture shop, you're at fault. Sorry.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Vaishali, I think we can talk forever with this podcast, right? But for our listeners, this is the point in the episode where I'd like to look forward, right? So clearly, a lot of experience, a lot of project on the belt. At this point in your career, what's next? What are you looking to explore, create, work towards?
So I think with all this gathered experience and where I am looking at is, there's no rocket science now that we are creating. Yeah. Okay. There is a structure to the system. We've all been following that structure. What is the breakthrough from that structure? So I'm been dwelling into this thought about what does an expert do, right? Whether it is, and knowing people. That's been the biggest asset that I've got. Like, I've been able to know people, not just in the industry, outside the industry. I've networked enough, all of those things. How do I get this managed done? So I'm looking at exploring that facet where you don't have to be necessarily a PMC, but also guiding the non-knowledgeable, non-exposed, your layman kind of a person or a client, to knowing who is the right person, who is the right match. What is that looking like? So
you're thinking more like, is it more like a one-on-one with a client, or more like a marketplace where a client can sort of pick and choose from?
Oh, no, it's a one-on-one.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a marketplace. It's not a platform, but it's looking at how do I represent, whether it's Alan Studio or whether anybody, how do I represent you correctly and put you in front of a client where your work is only then you get a specific kind of client or whatever.
So
marriage.
So sort of knowing these different design firms, knowing what they do, knowing what their expertise are, what they're good at, and then sort of almost matching them appropriately with the right client.
Yeah, because the most struggle that I've seen is not having the right client. That filtering.
That is true.
You are literally at logger's end where, like, okay, this is the detail, this is how I think, and this is my thinking process, this is my process of even designing. Whereas the client would be like, oh, let's just rush this through and I just want it done. And then there are certain clients who want the detail and everything, but you've probably got that brutalist architect who's not going to give you that detail.
True.
So I don't know. I don't even know if that's an area, but
I think there is a market for it. I would think so, because I think if you speak to any client, they've probably had a unjoyful experience with a designer at some point.
And most of the design stories, the designer stories of
and
clients.
Vice versa with designers, they've probably had clients as well. So I think that's an interesting niche. I think this is going to consume me for this weekend. You'll probably get a long voice note on Monday, be like, Vaishali, I have thoughts.
And I'll be happy to hear that. Let's brainstorm this together.
No, that is interesting. All right. Okay. That's a good vision to have. That's a good problem to solve.
Yeah, it's problem solving. Do we have enough design firms or design consultants? Probably yes. It's coming to literally a saturation point now.
Yeah.
Where like, okay, fine. But they all have their own clients, their own niches, everything there. It's there. There's enough work for everybody. I do believe that.
Yeah, abundance mindset. Very important.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that. Vaishali, at this point in the episode, we have something called the aForm tradition. As you probably know,
I do.
Shout out to Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO. I did not mean to copy you, just saying. But basically, this is a question from one of our previous guests asked to the new guest. You don't know who asked the question. The person who asked the question doesn't know who's going to get the question. Like you saw, please tell our audience, there is a legitimate question bank.
Oh, yes. He did not show me that bank even.
It exists.
It's like, just this is the picture. That's it.
It exists. It's a real thing. And we at random sort of pick up a question to ask. So I think for you, Trusty Jovel has pulled up a question.
Okay. Hi, Joel.
All right. Okay. It's kind of a slightly offensive question, so I apologize if it comes off as offensive. But I suppose this is one of our previous guests just having some
fun.
Can
I also offensively answer then?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, what's a completely useless talent that you are oddly proud of? I'm trying to think, what useless talent do I have that I'm proud of?
This is going to take a while.
I can pick black t-shirts very well. Very, very well. There's a science behind it now. It's probably useless to most people, but I totally know how to pick out a good black t-shirt now.
I think I can wear hair colors if somebody's known. It's a completely useless talent.
I can vouch for this. I have seen, I think was like the green fuchsia one, like the last one that you had?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that one. I'm like, yo, I like that.
Yeah, I think that's a completely useless talent where I feel like, what is wrong with you? Poppins.
Yeah, no, but that's cool, man. That is. It takes. I think the talent there is not so much the hair color. I think the talent is more the persona to carry it off.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's the talent, which I don't think is useless. I think it's a very important talent. People need more of that. But yeah, fun question. Thank you to our previous guest who asked that. I feel like he got an equally weird question, which is why he was like, I'm making weird for the next person. But yeah, this has been really cool. This has been a really fun chat. I think our listeners have definitely been entertained a lot.
Thank you.
And I keep telling all our guests that the show is only possible because of people like yourself coming on the show, donating your time. Time is everyone's kind of most important currency. So giving us your time, we highly, highly, highly value it. And a lot of our guests do as well. And our listeners do as well.
Yeah. And I think it's also a great opportunity to at least, like we were mentioning about this, they're very, very, I think yours is the only one who talks so much deeply in design in the region. So it's a great exposure, especially for the upcoming designers and everyone to understand where this market is going, what's happening around, and because it's different from any other region. So we definitely need more conversations like this. So thank you to you for putting this together.
Oh, thank you so much. And on that note, we will catch you all next week. Fellow aFormer, thank you so much for your time. If this episode added any value to you, please share it with anyone who may benefit. If you want to carry on the discussion, please get in touch with us over socials. We are at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. That is at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. Until next time, stay inspired.